Now let's begin. The digital clock on my dashboard read 10:47 a.m. when I merged onto the interstate, my mind still running through the quarterly projections I'd been reviewing in my downtown office. As a commercial architect, I specialized in adaptive reuse, taking dying strip malls and forgotten warehouses and transforming them into vibrant community spaces. The work kept me sharp, creative, constantly problem-solving. Today's meeting had been about a former textile factory in the industrial district, a beast of a project that would define the next 2 years of my life. My name is Adam Buckley, 34 years old, and until that Thursday morning in October, I thought I had a pretty good handle on the architecture of my own life. My son Lucas was 7, bright as hell, with my dark hair and his mother's green eyes. My wife Angela taught literature at the community college, passionate about Steinbeck and Hemingway, always pushing her students to find the deeper meaning in everything. We lived in a modest craftsman in the old part of town, the kind of place with original hardwood floors and a porch where Lucas would build elaborate Lego cities every weekend. Angela's mother, Martha Buchanan, was a different kind of structure altogether, all sharp angles and load-bearing walls of judgment. She'd never quite forgiven Angela for marrying an architect instead of a doctor or lawyer, someone who fit her country club vision of success. Martha lived 20 minutes away in a gated community called Preston Heights, the kind of place where the HOA measured your lawn with a ruler and neighbors competed over who had the most tasteful holiday decorations. Since Angela's father died 3 years ago, Martha had become increasingly involved in our lives. She'd started picking Lucas up from school twice a week, insisting it was helpful since both Angela and I worked. Angela appreciated it. I tolerated it. Lucas seemed to enjoy the attention, though he'd recently started making odd comments about Grandma being too serious and asking weird questions. The office phone rang at 11:03 a.m. My assistant Sean Crane transferred the call. "Mr. Buckley?" The voice was female, tight with controlled panic. "This is Vice Principal Aaron Lane from Riverside Elementary. There's been an incident involving Lucas. You need to come to the school immediately." My stomach dropped. "What kind of incident? Is he hurt?" "Please, Mr. Buckley, just come as quickly as you can. We're in the principal's office." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I grabbed my keys and jacket, told Sean to cancel my afternoon appointments, and was in my truck within 90 seconds. The school was 15 minutes away normally, but I made it in 9, running 2 yellow lights and pushing my old Ford F-150 harder than I had in years. Riverside Elementary was a brick building from the 1960s, renovated recently with my firm's help. Actually, we'd added a new media center and updated the facade. I knew every entrance, every hallway. I parked crooked in the visitor lot and sprinted toward the main entrance. The receptionist saw me coming and buzzed me through immediately. "Principal Richardson's office, Mr. Buckley." I could hear Martha's voice before I even reached the door. That clipped, authoritative tone she used when she wanted everyone to know she was the most important person in the room. "He's perfectly fine. I'll take him home and get him settled. There's no need for further drama." I pushed through the door. The office was crowded. Principal Janet Richardson sat behind her desk, looking deeply uncomfortable. Vice Principal Lane stood near the window. And there, in the corner on a small couch, was Lucas. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, tears streaked down his face, and there was a darkening bruise on his cheek. His eyes met mine, and something in them, fear mixed with relief, made my blood run cold. "Dad," he tried to get up, but Martha put a hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. "Adam, there's been a small accident on the playground," Martha said smoothly. "But Lucas is fine. I was just telling Principal Richardson that I'll take him to his pediatrician." "What happened to his arm?" I crossed to Lucas, gently moving Martha's hand aside. My son immediately wrapped his good arm around me. "It hurts, Dad," he whispered. "It really hurts." Principal Richardson cleared her throat. "Mr. Buckley, perhaps we should discuss this. Someone tell me what happened to my son." Now, Richardson and Lane exchanged glances. Martha stood up, smoothing her expensive wool skirt. "As I was saying, there was an incident on the playground equipment. Lucas fell from the monkey bars. I came as soon as the school called me." "We called you second," Lane interrupted quietly. "We called Mr. Buckley first at 11:03. We called Mrs. Buchanan at 11:15. I looked at my watch. It was 11:42 now. "When did this happen?" The playground monitor called it in at 10:52, Richardson said. She was choosing her words carefully, and I could see she was deeply troubled by something. But Mrs. Buchanan arrived at 11:23, before we'd even finished our call with you. Martha's expression didn't change. I was nearby, having coffee with friends. When you called, I came immediately. The thing is, Mrs. Buchanan, Lane said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. We have security cameras in the parking lot. They're new, installed last month after the vandalism incidents. And when we reviewed the footage, Richardson stood up. Mr. Buckley, I think you should see this. She turned her computer monitor so I could see the screen. Lane worked the controls, bringing up a video feed. The timestamp read 10:52 a.m. The parking lot, viewed from above. This is when our playground monitor called in the incident, Richardson said. The video showed the mostly empty lot. A few cars parked in the visitor spaces. Then a familiar Mercedes sedan pulled into frame. Martha's car, with its vanity plate, Butch 1. She'd been here the whole time. Keep watching, Lane said quietly. The timestamp moved forward. 10:54 a.m. The camera showed Martha getting out of her car. She looked around, checking the lot. Then she walked to the passenger side and opened the back door. Lucas emerged, wearing his backpack. He looked normal, happy even. They talked for a moment, though there was no audio. Then Martha reached into the car and pulled something out. A small bag. What is she? I started, but Richardson held up a hand. The video continued. Martha led Lucas around to the side of her car, positioning him between the Mercedes and a large SUV parked next to it, out of sight from the school building. She set the bag down and pulled something out of it. My hands clenched into fists when I saw what it was. A jump rope. Martha wrapped the rope around Lucas's left wrist, looping it several times. Lucas looked confused, pulling back slightly, but Martha kept hold of the other end. She said something to him, and he nodded hesitantly. Then she yanked the rope hard. Lucas's arm twisted at an unnatural angle as he fell backward against the SUV. The impact was sickening even in silence. He crumpled to the ground, and even without sound, I could see he was crying. Martha stood there for a moment, looking down at him. Then she calmly unwrapped the rope from his wrist, put it back in her bag, and helped Lucas to his feet. She brushed off his clothes, wiping his face with what looked like tissues from her purse. The timestamp now read 10:57 a.m. She walked Lucas to a different part of the parking lot, near the playground area, positioning him by the fence. She made him sit down, said something else to him, then walked back to her car. She got in and drove away. The video jumped forward. 11:23 a.m. Martha's Mercedes returned to the parking lot. She parked in the same spot, got out, and walked briskly toward the school entrance, her face arranged in an expression of concern. I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the air too thick. We only discovered this when we were trying to understand the timeline, Richardson said quietly. The playground monitor found Lucas by the fence at 10:52. He told her he'd fallen from the monkey bars. But Lucas wasn't on the playground during recess this morning. His teacher confirmed he was in class until 10:45, and then he disappeared. I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. I looked at Martha. You pulled him out of school early. You took him to the parking lot, and you deliberately hurt him. Martha's face remained composed, but something flickered in her eyes. That video doesn't show what you think it shows. Lucas was being difficult. I was simply disciplining him. Children need to learn. You broke his arm. My voice was getting louder. You hurt him on purpose, then staged it to look like a playground accident. I did no such thing. Lucas is clumsy. He fell in the parking lot, and I was trying to help him. The video shows you yanking a rope around his wrist hard enough to dislocate his shoulder and fracture his arm, Lane said, her professionalism cracking. We've already called Child Protective Services, Mrs. Buchanan. The police are on their way. Lucas was sobbing now, pressing his face into my chest. I'm sorry, Dad. Grandma said if I told anyone what really happened, she'd make sure you and Mom got in trouble. She said it was our secret. I held my son carefully, trying not to jostle his injured arm, while rage built in my chest like pressure in a sealed container. Martha stood there in her designer clothes, her perfect hair, her country club composure, and I saw her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as Angela's mother, not as Lucas's grandmother, but as something cold and calculated and cruel. Why? I asked. Why would you hurt him? For the first time, Martha's mask slipped. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. Because Angela needs to understand what it means to have real responsibilities. She's wasting her life teaching at that community college, married to an architect who works out of a converted warehouse. My daughter was meant for better. Lucas needs proper discipline, proper education, proper influences. When she sees how fragile everything is, how easily her little world can fall apart, maybe she'll finally listen to me. You hurt a 7-year-old child to manipulate your daughter? Richardson looked appalled. I was teaching Lucas resilience. Character. Something he clearly isn't getting at home. Martha picked up her purse. And I'll be calling my lawyer before the police arrive. This has all been blown completely out of proportion. She walked toward the door, but I moved to block her path. We stood face to face, and I had to work to keep my voice level. You're not going anywhere near my son again. You're not coming to our house. You're not calling. You're done. Martha smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. Angela will never believe you. I'm her mother. She needs me, especially now that her father's gone. You're just the man she married. And when this all settles down, when the investigators realize there's no actual proof of intent, we'll see who Angela chooses to believe. Sirens were approaching. Through the window, I could see a police cruiser pulling into the parking lot. We'll see, I said quietly. What Martha didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that I made my living reading structures, understanding how they fit together, finding the load-bearing walls and the weak points. I spent my days looking at buildings and seeing not what they appeared to be, but what they actually were underneath. And I was very, very good at taking things apart. The emergency room doctor confirmed a radial fracture and a partially dislocated shoulder. Lucas would need a cast for 6 weeks and physical therapy after that. While they worked on him, I called Angela. Adam, what's wrong? The school called and said there was an incident. Where are you? In my office between classes. What happened? I need you to come to Mercy General ER right now. Lucas is hurt, but he's going to be okay. Don't call your mother. Don't answer if she calls you. Just come here. There was a pause. Angela knew me well enough to recognize when something was seriously wrong. I'm on my way. The police took my statement and Martha's. They reviewed the security footage. Martha's lawyer arrived, a sharp-faced man named Craig Drake who specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. He watched the video once, conferred with Martha in hushed tones, and then started making calls. I sat with Lucas in his ER bay, holding his good hand while the painkillers kicked in. Am I in trouble? He asked in a small voice. No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. Grandma said we had a secret. She said secrets are important. Some secrets are important, I told him. But when someone hurts you and tells you to keep it secret, that's not the kind of secret you have to keep. That's the kind you tell mom and dad about right away. He nodded slowly. She's been mean for a while. Not all the time. Just sometimes. She says things about you and mom. Says we don't live right. Angela arrived 20 minutes later, her face pale with worry. She looked from Lucas and his cast to me, and I saw the moment she registered that something was deeply wrong beyond a playground accident. Adam. I took her outside the bay where Lucas couldn't hear. In the hallway, with the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air, I told her everything. I showed her the video on my phone. Richardson had sent it to me, saying I'd need it for the investigation. Angela watched in silence. When Martha yanked the rope and Lucas fell, she made a small sound like something breaking. When the video ended, she was shaking. That's my mother, she whispered. That's my mother hurting my baby. I know. She planned it. She took him out of school, hurt him deliberately, and then came back later pretending to be the concerned grandmother. Yes. Angela looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Something hard and cold. What's going to happen to her? The police are investigating. CPS is involved. Drake is trying to minimize everything, probably going to argue it was an accident or discipline gone too far. It's her first offense on record. She's wealthy, well-connected, white, 63 years old. The system is designed to be lenient with people like her. But the video shows her hurting Lucas, yes. But Drake will argue intent. Was she trying to break his arm or just discipline him too roughly? Was it premeditated or a moment of poor judgment? The DA might charge her with child abuse or reckless endangerment, but given her resources and lack of prior record, she'll probably plead to a lesser charge, get probation, maybe some court-mandated counseling. Angela closed her eyes. She called him clumsy. She planned this to manipulate me, to show me my life was fragile. She broke our son's arm to make a point. I know. What are we going to do? I thought about Martha's smile in the principal's office, her absolute confidence that she'd walk away from this with minimal consequences. I thought about Lucas asking if he was in trouble, about the fear in his voice when he talked about keeping secrets. Whatever it takes, I said. Angela looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Whatever it takes. We went back to Lucas together. He was drowsy from the medication, but he smiled when he saw Angela. She climbed onto the hospital bed carefully, gathering him close without touching his injured arm. Hey, baby, she whispered. I'm so sorry this happened. It's okay, Mom. Dad says Grandma can't come over anymore. That's right. She can't. Angela's voice was steady, but I could see tears on her cheeks. She won't ever hurt you again. I promise. The police came back later with an update. They'd arrested Martha on charges of child abuse and filing a false report. She'd posted bail within 2 hours. Drake had arranged everything. There would be a preliminary hearing in 2 weeks. We have the video evidence, Detective Damon Rasmussen told us. It's pretty damning. But her lawyer's already making noise about mental health, about the stress of being a widow, about this being completely out of character. He's going to fight this hard. What do you think will happen? I asked. Rasmussen hesitated. Honestly, given her resources and the legal tactics Drake's known for, I'd expect a plea deal. Reduced charges, probation, restraining order. She'll probably keep her freedom and her reputation mostly intact. It's not fair, but it's reality. After he left, Angela and I sat in silence. Lucas had fallen asleep, his small body exhausted from pain and fear. She heard him to control me, Angela said finally. She's been trying to control me my entire life. Where I went to college, who I married, how I raised my son. And when I didn't comply, when I built a life she didn't approve of, she attacked the thing I love most. She underestimated you. And she definitely underestimated Lucas. No. Angela looked at me. She underestimated you. Over the next week, the pieces fell into place exactly as Rasmussen predicted. The DA charged Martha with third-degree assault and child endangerment. Drake immediately began negotiations for a plea deal. CPS conducted their investigation and determined Lucas was safe in our custody, but recommended a restraining order against Martha. Angela went through her mother's things that we had in our house. Photos, gifts, the spare key Martha had insisted on having. She found Lucas's journal, a small notebook he'd been keeping for school. In it, he'd written about visits with Grandma. Grandma says Dad's job isn't important. She says architects just draw pictures and real men make real money. Grandma told me Mom should work at a real college, not a community college. She says only people who can't do better teach there. Grandma says I need to be stronger. She pinched my arm at her house and said I was too soft. She said boys don't cry. There were more entries, dating back months. A pattern of psychological abuse, of manipulation, of deliberate erosion of a child's sense of self-worth. Martha had been grooming Lucas, trying to turn him against us, against the life we'd built. I photographed every page and sent them to Rasmussen. At night, while Angela slept fitfully beside me and Lucas's nightlight glowed down the hall, I sat in my home office and did what I did best. I looked at structures. I analyzed load-bearing points. I found weaknesses. Martha Buchanan had built her life on certain assumptions. Her wealth protected her. Her social standing insulated her. Her role as a widow and grandmother made her sympathetic. She believed in her own invincibility. But every structure had weak points. You just had to know where to look. I started with her finances. Martha lived well. The house in Preston Heights, the Mercedes, membership at the country club, regular trips to her vacation condo in Hilton Head. Her husband Gerald had left her comfortable when he died, or so she'd always claimed. I pulled Gerald's probate records. They were public, easy to access. The estate had been substantial, $2.3 million in total assets. Martha had inherited most of it, with small trust funds set up for Angela and her brother Roy, who lived in California and hadn't spoken to Martha in 5 years. But something didn't add up. Martha was spending at a rate that should have depleted the estate within 3 years, yet here she was, still living large. I dug deeper. Preston Heights had an HOA with financial disclosures. Martha's house had been refinanced twice in the past 3 years. She'd pulled out nearly $400,000 in equity. I checked her country club membership. She was 6 months behind on dues. The Mercedes was leased, not owned, and according to the dealership records I convinced a contact to pull, she'd missed the last 2 payments. Martha Buchanan was broke, or close to it. She was maintaining the illusion of wealth, but the foundation was crumbling. The question was, where had the money gone? I spent the next 3 days following the financial trail. It led to a brokerage account managed by a firm called Highland Investment Partners. Martha had invested heavily in high-risk ventures over the past 2 years, chasing returns to maintain her lifestyle. Most had failed. She'd lost over $1.2 million. But it got more interesting. The broker who'd managed her account was a man named Jeffrey Kirby. He'd left Highland 6 months ago amid accusations of unsuitable investments and elder exploitation. No charges were filed. Highland had settled quietly with affected clients. Except Martha hadn't been part of that settlement. Why? I dug into Jeffrey Kirby. He was 42, divorced, living in a condo downtown. His social media showed recent photos from expensive restaurants and a new Porsche. For someone who'd left his job in disgrace, he was doing well. I called Highland and posed as a potential client wanting to verify Kirby's credentials. The compliance officer I spoke with was carefully neutral, but when I mentioned Martha's name, there was a pause. I can't discuss client accounts, she said. But I can tell you that Mr. Kirby is no longer affiliated with our firm, and we would not recommend working with him. Did he do something illegal? Another pause. The situation was resolved internally. If you have concerns about specific accounts, I'd suggest speaking with the SEC. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called an old college friend who worked for the Securities and Exchange Commission. Adam Buckley, Benjamin Dow said when he answered. It's been 5 years? 6. How's DC treating you? Same old bureaucracy. What can I do for you? I explained the situation, not the assault on Lucas, just the financial questions. Can you tell me if anyone's filed a complaint about Jeffrey Kirby? Let me check. I heard typing. Yeah, actually. 3 complaints in the past year. All from elderly clients who claimed he put them in unsuitable high-risk investments. The firm settled 2 cases. The third. More typing. The third complaint was withdrawn. Client name is sealed, but the date matches when Kirby left Highland. Why would someone withdraw a complaint after filing it? Could be lots of reasons. They settled privately. They were paid off. They were threatened. Hard to say without more information. If someone wanted to reopen an investigation, what would they need? Evidence of fraud or elder abuse. Proof that the broker knowingly misrepresented investments or manipulated a vulnerable client. It's a high bar, but it's doable. I thanked Ben and ended the call. Then I sat back and looked at what I had. Martha had lost most of her inheritance to bad investments made by a broker who'd been forced out for exploiting elderly clients. She'd withdrawn her complaint, probably in exchange for some kind of settlement that Kirby hadn't honored. Now she was broke, desperate to maintain appearances, and taking out her frustration on the daughter who disappointed her and the grandson she saw as too soft. She'd hurt Lucas to punish Angela, to punish me, to reassert control over a life that was spiraling away from her. But she'd made a critical error. She'd attacked my family, and she'd underestimated what I was willing to do about it. I opened a new file on my computer and titled it Structural Analysis, Martha Buchanan. Then I started mapping out the blueprint for her destruction. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Drake had worked his magic, getting the DA to offer a plea deal. Martha would plead no contest to reckless endangerment, a misdemeanor. She'd get 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and a restraining order keeping her away from Lucas. No jail time. No permanent record of child abuse. Angela wanted to fight it. She should go to prison. She should, I agreed. But the system isn't going to do that. Drake's too good, and Martha's too sympathetic to a jury. Wealthy widow, no prior record, claims she was just disciplining her grandson and it went too far. We could go to trial, put Lucas on the stand, drag this out for months, and probably end up with the same result or worse. So we just let her win? No. I pulled up the file I'd been building. We let her think she's winning. We take the plea deal, and we use the time to build something better. I showed Angela what I'd found. The financial records, the failed investments, the broker who'd exploited her mother. Angela read through it all, her expression hardening. She's broke. Almost. She's got maybe 6 months before she has to sell the house in Preston Heights. Her lifestyle, is unsustainable. And Jeffrey Kirby stole from her. Technically, he made unsuitable investment recommendations. But yes, he essentially stole from her, and she filed a complaint then withdrew it. Angela looked at me. What are you planning? I'm planning to give your mother exactly what she deserves. Not prison. That's too clean, too simple. I'm going to dismantle her life the way she tried to dismantle ours. Piece by piece. Until there's nothing left but the truth. I want to help. I was hoping you'd say that. We accepted the plea deal. Martha stood in court, perfectly composed in a navy suit, and said the words her lawyer had prepared. I deeply regret that my attempt to discipline Lucas resulted in injury. It was never my intent to harm him. I love my grandson and only wanted what was best for him. The judge gave her probation and ordered the restraining order. Martha walked out of the courthouse with Drake, climbed into her Mercedes, and drove away. To anyone watching, she'd gotten away with it. But I was playing a longer game. The first move was Jeffrey Kirby. I'd been following him for 2 weeks, documenting his lifestyle, his patterns. He ate lunch at the same upscale bistro 3 times a week. He worked out at an expensive gym every morning. He was dating a woman named Brooke Hilton, a real estate agent with her own money troubles. I arranged a meeting with Kirby under false pretenses. I called his new firm, a small boutique investment company, and made an appointment to discuss managing a substantial inheritance. I used a fake name and burner phone. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Kirby was smooth, practiced, wearing an expensive suit and Tag Heuer watch. He had the kind of smile that probably worked on a lot of people. So, Mr. Sullivan, he said, using my fake name. Tell me about this inheritance. My father passed recently. Left me about $800,000. I'm looking for someone who can help me grow it aggressively. I'm young. I can handle risk. Kirby's eyes lit up. I specialize in high-growth opportunities. Let me show you some of the portfolios I've managed. He launched into a pitch, showing me projected returns that were almost criminally optimistic. I let him talk, recording everything on my phone hidden in my jacket pocket. These numbers seem almost too good to be true, I said. The market rewards bold action, Kirby said. Of course, there's always risk. But with the right strategy and the right investments, we can see returns of 30, 40, even 50% annually. Have you had clients who've seen those returns? Absolutely. I've been managing money for 15 years. I know how to read market trends. What about Martha Buchanan? She was one of your clients at Highland, wasn't she? Kirby's smile faltered slightly. I can't discuss other clients. She's my aunt. I lied smoothly. She mentioned you'd helped her with some investments. But then there was some problem, and you left Highland. That was a misunderstanding. Some clients don't have the risk tolerance for aggressive growth strategies. Mrs. Buchanan made certain choices against my advice. Really? Because I heard she filed a complaint with the SEC claiming you put her in unsuitable investments and lost over $1 million of her money. Kirby stood up. I think this meeting is over. Sit down, Jeffrey. I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made him pause. I'm not here to invest with you. I'm here to give you a choice. Who are you? Adam Buckley, Martha Buchanan's son-in-law. The father of the 7-year-old grandson she assaulted to punish her daughter for not living the life Martha wanted. Kirby sat down slowly. I had nothing to do with that. No, but you had everything to do with Martha losing her inheritance. You put a 60-year-old widow in high-risk venture capital investments and cryptocurrency speculation. You churned her account to generate commissions. And when she figured it out and filed a complaint, you paid her $50,000 to withdraw it, didn't you? That was a settlement. It was legal. It was hush money. And you never intended to honor the full amount, which is why Martha only got $20,000 and you kept promising the rest was coming. That's fraud, Jeffrey. That's wire fraud. Actually, since I'm sure you used email or phone calls to make those promises. Kirby's face had gone pale. What do you want? I want you to write a detailed confession. Every unsuitable investment, every misrepresentation, every promise you made to Martha about returns you knew were unrealistic. I want dates, amounts, and specific lies you told. And I want you to confirm that you paid her $20,000 to withdraw her SEC complaint with promises of more money that you never delivered. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'll send this recording to the SEC, along with the financial records I've obtained showing your pattern of elder exploitation. I'll make sure every client you've ever had knows what you did. I'll contact Brooke Hilton and let her know the man she's dating is a fraud who's likely managing her money into the ground just like he did Martha's. I'll destroy you, Jeffrey. Professionally, personally, financially. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Write the confession, and I'll use it to ensure Martha faces consequences for what she did to my son. Don't write it, and I'll make sure you face consequences for what you did to her and God knows how many other elderly clients. Either way, someone's paying for their crimes. You get to decide if it's you. Kirby stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing options. Finally, he nodded. What do you want me to write? 3 days later, I had Jeffrey Kirby's confession. 8 pages, single-spaced, detailing exactly how he'd exploited Martha and at least 6 other clients. He'd signed it and had it notarized, probably figuring it was insurance against me following through on my threats. He was right. I had no intention of destroying him if he cooperated. But I also had no intention of protecting him if he didn't. The next move was more delicate. I needed to understand the full scope of Martha's financial situation and her psychology. Why had she attacked Lucas specifically in that way? What was driving her beyond simple control issues? I called Angela's brother Roy in California. We'd only met a few times, at the wedding and Gerald's funeral. But I knew he'd had his own falling out with Martha years ago. Adam. He sounded surprised when he answered. Is everything okay? Not exactly. Can we talk? I told him everything. The assault on Lucas, the court case, Martha's financial collapse. When I finished, there was a long silence. Jesus, Roy said finally. I knew she was controlling, but I didn't think she'd ever actually hurt someone. When did you stop talking to her? About 5 years ago, right after Dad died. She wanted me to move back here, take over Dad's role in her life. I was just starting my business in San Francisco, newly married. I told her no, and she said some terrible things. About my wife, about my choices, about me being a disappointment. I hung up and haven't spoken to her since. Did she ever try to contact you? A few times. I didn't respond. Kara, my wife, thought I should try to reconcile, but I knew it would just be more of the same. Martha doesn't want children. She wants supporting actors in the play of her life. Do you know why she's always been like this? Roy hesitated. Have you ever heard about her childhood? Not much. She doesn't talk about it. There's a reason. Our grandparents, Martha's parents, were wealthy. Old money from the textile industry. But they lost everything in the 80s when the mills shut down. Martha was in high school when they went from debutante balls to food stamps. It destroyed them. Her mother drank herself to death. Her father died of a heart attack before Martha graduated college. So she's terrified of losing status. She's obsessed with it. Meeting Dad, marrying into his family. They weren't as wealthy as what she'd lost, but they were comfortable, respectable. She rebuilt her life on that foundation. And when Dad died, when she realized the money wasn't infinite, that she'd have to actually manage finances instead of just spending, it broke something in her. She sees Angela's life as a rejection of everything she values. Exactly. Angela could have married a lawyer or doctor from the country club. Instead, she married an architect who works in a converted warehouse. You guys are happy, but you're not Martha's vision of success. And Lucas represents everything Martha thinks went wrong. We talked for another hour. Roy agreed to write a statement for me, documenting Martha's pattern of manipulation and psychological abuse going back decades. He also sent me photos from his childhood, images of Martha at her parents' funeral, young and devastated. Images of her at her wedding, radiant and triumphant. A timeline of transformation from trauma to control. I added it all to my file. The final piece fell into place when I talked to Martha's neighbors in Preston Heights. I posed as a researcher doing a study on community satisfaction and knocked on doors, asking questions. Mrs. Louise Simmons, who lived 2 houses down from Martha, was happy to talk. Oh, Martha's a difficult neighbor, she said. Always complaining about something. Our tree drops leaves in her yard, and you'd think we'd committed a crime. But lately, she's been different. Different how? Quieter. Less hostile. Almost scared. I saw her arguing with a man in her driveway a few weeks ago. Heated conversation. The man left in a Porsche. Jeffrey Kirby. Probably demanding Martha stop calling him about the rest of her settlement money. Has she had many visitors? Her daughter used to come by weekly with her grandson. Sweet little boy. But I haven't seen them in months. I thanked Mrs. Simmons and moved on. Every conversation added detail to the picture. Martha isolated, desperate, clinging to a lifestyle she couldn't afford, lashing out at the people closest to her. That night, I sat down with Angela and showed her everything I'd gathered. "She's broken," Angela said, reading through Roy's statement. "She's been broken since she was a teenager, and she's spent 40 years building walls to hide it. Broken people can still do terrible things. She hurt Lucas. She tried to destroy our family." "I know." Angela looked at me. "So what do we do with all of this?" "We finish it," I said. "We make sure she can never hurt anyone again." I laid out the plan. It was complex, multi-layered, designed to strip away every protection Martha had built around herself. It would be devastating, thorough, and completely legal. Angela listened, and when I finished, she nodded. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow." I started by filing a civil lawsuit. Not against Martha directly, but against Jeffrey Kirby and Highland Investment Partners for elder exploitation and fraud. I included Martha as a named victim in the suit, attaching Kirby's confession and all the financial records documenting her losses. The lawsuit was public record. I made sure copies went to the local newspaper, the Business Journal, and several financial watchdog blogs. Within 48 hours, the story was everywhere. Local broker exploited elderly clients, including woman later charged with assault. The article drew connections I'd carefully laid out. Martha Buchanan, recently charged with assaulting her 7-year-old grandson, had been systematically defrauded by her investment broker. She'd lost over $1.2 million, driving her to financial desperation. The assault on her grandson occurred in the context of this financial and psychological collapse. It was all true. It was also calculated to destroy any sympathy Martha might have had. The country club called Martha 3 days later. They were restructuring their membership, and her past due fees meant she was being removed from the roster. Preston Heights HOA sent a notice that her house was going into foreclosure for non-payment. The calls came fast after that. Credit card companies, the Mercedes dealership, her insurance provider. The facade of wealth crumbled publicly, spectacularly. Martha called Angela for the first time in months. Angela didn't answer, but she listened to the voicemail. "Angela, please. I need to talk to you. These lies in the papers. I need you to tell them the truth. You're my daughter. You have to help me." Angela deleted the message. I took the next step. I contacted the local district attorney with a motion to reopen Martha's case. I provided Lucas's journal entries, documenting months of psychological abuse. I included Roy's statement about Martha's lifelong pattern of manipulation. I attached expert analysis I'd commissioned from a child psychologist, explaining how Martha's actions constituted not just a single incident, but part of systematic emotional abuse. The DA reviewed everything and called me in for a meeting. "Mr. Buckley," she said, "when we made the plea deal with Mrs. Buchanan, we didn't have access to this information." "I know. I wasn't ready to share it then. This changes things." The journal entries alone show premeditation. She'd been psychologically abusing Lucas for months before the physical assault. That makes this not a single incident, but a pattern. "Can you reopen the case?" "Technically, she's already pleaded and been sentenced. But I can file charges for the psychological abuse as separate incidents. It's risky. A good defense attorney would argue double jeopardy. But with this evidence, I think we can make it stick." "Do it." New charges were filed. 3 counts of child endangerment based on the journal entries, 1 count of psychological abuse. Martha was arrested again, and this time, bail was set higher. She couldn't post it. She spent 3 nights in county jail before Drake managed to get her released. The second arrest made bigger news. Woman who broke grandson's arm arrested again on new abuse charges. Martha's world was collapsing, and I was the architect of every structural failure. But I wasn't done. I reached out to Roy and asked him to file for an audit of their father's estate. As a beneficiary, he had the right to ensure the executor, Martha, had properly managed the assets. Roy agreed. The audit revealed what I'd suspected. Martha had dipped into the trust fund set up for Roy and Angela, claiming administrative expenses that were actually her personal bills. She'd taken over $150,000 from funds that weren't legally hers to touch. Roy filed a complaint. The probate court issued a summons. Now Martha was facing potential criminal charges for misappropriation of trust funds. Her lawyer, Craig Drake, withdrew from her case. Too many fronts, too much negative publicity. He recommended a public defender. I watched it all unfold like a building demolition. First the supports were weakened, then the charges were set, and finally the whole structure came down in a carefully controlled collapse. Martha lost her house, lost her car, lost her country club membership, her social standing, her dignity. She moved into a small apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place she would have sneered at 6 months ago. The trial for the new charges was scheduled for December. Angela and I prepared Lucas carefully, working with a child advocate to make sure he understood what would happen in court. "Will I have to see Grandma?" he asked. "Yes," I told him honestly. "But she can't hurt you. You'll be safe. We'll be right there." "Will she go to jail?" "Maybe. Probably." "Good," Lucas said. He was 8 now. His arm healed, but there were scars that would take longer to fade. "She was mean. She hurt me on purpose. She should go to jail." "She should," Angela agreed. "And we're going to make sure she does." The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented the security footage, the journal entries, Roy's testimony about lifetime patterns of abuse, the child psychologist's analysis. They presented evidence that Martha had financially exploited her own children's trusts while simultaneously abusing her grandson. Drake's replacement, a public defender named Benny Sullivan, did his best. He argued that Martha was a victim herself, of Jeffrey Kirby's fraud, of financial pressure, of the stress of widowhood. He painted her as a woman who'd made terrible mistakes but deserved compassion. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge looked at Martha with something like pity. "Mrs. Buchanan, the evidence shows a pattern of manipulation, abuse, and exploitation that spans decades. You hurt your grandson not in a moment of poor judgment, but as part of a calculated attempt to control your daughter's life. You stole from your children's trusts. You've shown no genuine remorse, only concern for yourself. I'm sentencing you to 6 years in state prison, followed by 10 years supervised probation. You are forbidden from contact with Lucas Buckley or any minor children during this time." Martha stood there, 63 years old, dressed in a cheap suit from a discount store, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. They led her away in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. I made a brief statement. "Justice has been served. My son is safe. My family can heal. That's all that matters." That night, Angela and I sat on our porch while Lucas slept peacefully in his room. The stars were out, the air was cool, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. "You destroyed her," Angela said quietly. "She destroyed herself. I just exposed the truth. It was more than that. You were surgical, precise. You knew exactly where to hit. I'm an architect. I understand structures, and I understand how to take them apart." Angela leaned against me. "Thank you for protecting our son, for protecting us. I always will." We sat in silence for a while, watching the neighborhood settle into night. Somewhere across town, Martha was in a cell, beginning 6 years of understanding what it meant to lose everything. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like a father who'd protected his child the only way he could. But there was one final move to make. The next morning, I called Jeffrey Kirby. "It's over," I told him. "Martha's in prison. The charges against you are being dropped as part of a settlement with Highland. You're free." "Why?" "Because I kept my word. You wrote the confession, you cooperated, and I'm not interested in punishing you beyond what's necessary. But Jeffrey, if I ever hear that you've exploited another client, if I ever see your name connected to unsuitable investments or elder abuse, I will personally ensure you spend the next decade in federal prison. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear." I hung up. Justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about setting boundaries and making sure people understood the consequences of crossing them. 6 months later, Lucas turned 8. We had a party in our backyard, a big celebration with friends and family. Roy flew in from California with his wife. Kids from Lucas's class ran around playing tag. Angela made her famous chocolate cake. Lucas's arm had healed completely. He was back to building Lego cities, back to being a normal kid. But he was different too. Stronger, more aware. He'd testified against his grandmother with courage I'd never seen in someone so young. He'd told the truth even when it was hard. He'd learned that secrets designed to protect abusers needed to be exposed. As the party wound down and the sun set, Lucas came and sat next to me on the porch steps. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think Grandma will ever be sorry?" "Like really sorry?" I thought about it carefully. I don't know, buddy. Some people can't admit when they're wrong. They're too afraid of what it means about them. Do you think she still thinks she was helping me when she hurt me? I think she told herself that for a long time. But deep down, I think she knew she was wrong. She was just more afraid of admitting it than she was sad about hurting you. Lucas nodded slowly. I'm not afraid of her anymore. Good. You never have to be. Are you still mad at her? Yes, but not the way I was. Now it's just sad. She could have had a good relationship with you, with us. She chose control instead. And now she's lost everything. Did you make her lose everything? I looked at my son, his serious face, his honest eyes. He deserved the truth. I made sure the truth came out. I made sure she faced consequences for hurting you. But everything she lost, her money, her house, her freedom, those were results of her own choices. She chose to steal from your mom and Uncle Roy. She chose to hurt you. She chose to spend her life trying to control people instead of loving them. I just made sure those choices had consequences. Lucas thought about this. So you didn't make her bad. You just made sure people knew she was bad. That's a good way to put it. He smiled. I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my son. Angela called us in for cake. We went inside together, into the warm glow of our home, our family, our life that Martha had tried so hard to destroy and failed. Later that night, after the guests had left and Lucas was asleep, I stood in my office looking at the file I'd built. Structural analysis, Martha Buchanan. Hundreds of pages, meticulously documented, carefully constructed. I'd spent my career learning how to read buildings, how to understand their strengths and weaknesses, how to transform them or, when necessary, how to safely bring them down. Martha had been the most challenging demolition of my life, but also the most necessary. I closed the file and put it away. I wouldn't need it anymore. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. In his room, Lucas slept peacefully, safe and loved. In our bedroom, Angela was already asleep, finally able to rest without the weight of her mother's manipulation. And in a prison 2 hours away, Martha Buchanan sat in a cell, finally understanding that the structures we build in life, whether they're made of steel and concrete or lies and control, eventually reveal their true nature. I'd been an architect for 12 years. I'd learned that the best buildings were honest about what they were. They didn't pretend to be stronger than their foundations could support. They didn't hide structural weaknesses behind beautiful facades. Martha had spent a lifetime building a facade. When I took it away, there was nothing underneath but the scared girl who'd lost everything once and spent decades making sure it never happened again by hurting everyone who got close to her. I didn't feel sorry for her, but I understood her. And understanding was its own kind of closure. I turned off the light and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in months, knowing that my family was safe, that justice had been served, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth do what truth does best, reveal what was always there, waiting to be seen. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.